The smell of smoke from my destroyed home still lingered in my hair as she confidently entered my courtroom as though she had every right to be there. I was sitting there as Judge Miriam Blackwood, wearing my judicial robes and holding my gavel, looking directly at the individual who had just set fire to a judge's residence. The audacity of her actions made me grind my teeth in anger. However, Bryn Ashworth Sterling had no concept of the situation she had created for herself. You see, when you set fire to a judge's residence, you'd better hope she doesn't get an opportunity to reciprocate through legal channels. And I was prepared to deliver comprehensive justice accompanied by substantial federal imprisonment. This neighborhood association tyrant believed that destroying my home would silence me. Rather, it ignited a determination within me that would dismantle her entire criminal operation. Every unlawful penalty, every false accusation, every threatening action, I had documentation of everything. What would your response be if the person who harmed you delivered themselves into your hands through legal means? What location are you viewing from? This retribution becomes severe. Half a year before my residence became evidence in a criminal case, I was Judge Miriam Blackwood. I was respected, intimidating to lawbreakers, and emotionally devastated. I had recently laid Harold to rest after witnessing cancer consume him gradually. 28 years of matrimony had ended. Our home from the 1940s in Pinewood Estates seemed like a tomb. Pinewood previously housed working-class families raising children and retired educators caring for gardens. Then wealth arrived. Suddenly, humble ranch-style houses were being demolished to make way for oversized homes featuring three-car garages and wine storage areas. The longtime residents, individuals like Walt Henderson who had resided here since the mid-1960s, observed their property taxes surge while newcomers complained about preserving neighborhood quality. Introducing the leading figure of this transformation effort, Bryn Ashworth Sterling. Imagine every privileged suburban disaster you've encountered. Then incorporate expensive athletic wear and an inflated sense of importance. At 45 years old, operating a silver Tesla worth more than most individuals' yearly income, perpetually carrying some expensive nutritional beverage while lecturing everyone about proper living. She had relocated here 2 years prior with her contractor spouse, immediately declaring intentions to enhance Pinewood to reach its potential. In other words, eliminate the undesirable residents. My initial interaction with Bryn occurred during the installation of Harold's commemorative fence. We had designed this 6-foot privacy structure together during his remaining months. Our refuge where we could enjoy coffee and observe sunrises without unwanted observation. The pleasant aroma of his award-winning roses permeated the morning atmosphere as I labored. 15 years of his dedicated cultivation still flourishing despite his death. The sound of costly boots crushing autumn foliage signaled her approach. You're the widow. Not sympathy, not introductions, merely emotionless evaluation. Judge Blackwood, I responded, cleaning dirt from my palms with intentional composure. Correct, the judge. She stated my position as though it were an affliction. I'm Bryn, association president. We face an issue. She produced the pink measuring device, obviously her preferred tool. The metallic sound of it extending pierced the morning silence like a striking whip. She measured my fence with exaggerated exactness, pursing her lips in fabricated disapproval. 6 feet 2 inches. Our rules explicitly specify a 6-foot limit. That constitutes a $500 penalty plus immediate dismantling expenses. I rose slowly, my spine cracking from sorrow and insufficient sleep. Display that rule to me. Her manicured digits shuffled through a leather case, tapping against documents like miniature gavels. 5 minutes of searching yielded nothing because the regulation was non-existent. My fence measured precisely 6 feet. I had hired a certified surveyor expressly to prevent this absurdity. Well, she exhaled, her complexion reddening beneath her artificial tan. We'll address that, Judge. The hostility in her tone indicated this wasn't about property regulations. That night, while eating reheated food and Harold's preferred whiskey, I accessed court documents. Success. 3 years earlier, Sterling Premium Builders had stood before my bench attempting to defraud an 80-year-old veteran of $30,000 for purported urgent roof work. The roof had no issues. I had ruled decisively against them, including recommending them for contractor fraud inquiry. This fence dispute was retaliation, nothing more. However, Bryn had committed a severe mistake. She had chosen as her target a woman who had dedicated 20 years to sentencing killers, sexual predators, and fraudsters without hesitation. Someone who had watched her life partner perish with grace while planning how to preserve his legacy. An individual with nothing remaining to lose and comprehensive knowledge of how the judicial system could be exploited by someone understanding its vulnerabilities. The coarse feel of Harold's fence supports beneath my hand reminded me why I had constructed this boundary. Not to exclude the world, but to safeguard something holy. Our recollections, our affection, our concluding undertaking together. Bryn Ashworth Sterling had initiated conflict with a federal judge's sanctuary. In my courtroom, we possessed a specialized designation for that degree of foolishness, primary evidence in a federal prosecution. She was unaware of what she had triggered. Within 14 days, Bryn initiated what I can only characterize as mental warfare disguised as association enforcement. The woman had obviously studied every petty dictator's manual and chosen to transform my existence into her personal experiment in stress. The registered letters began arriving consistently, substantial manila packages that made my postal carrier grimace apologetically. 7 pieces of certified correspondence in 10 days, each more ridiculous than the previous. Infraction Notification Number 1. Unauthorized ornamental garden element. The violation: Harold's commemorative marker, a basic granite stone inscribed, "In memory of love that grows eternal." Evidently, mourning monuments contradicted Pinewood's consistent landscape appearance. Infraction Notification Number 2. Non-compliant mailbox shade. My black mailbox had been standard equipment since the Reagan presidency. Abruptly, it was generating visual disharmony. But the notification that made my teeth grind. Infraction Notification Number 3. Extreme bird feeding generating problematic circumstances. My solitary humble feeder attracted cardinals, Harold's beloved birds. Observing them had become my morning practice. Coffee vapor mingling with mountain atmosphere, while I imagined he might still approach from behind. Each correspondence demanded penalties ranging from $200 to $500, threatening property liens and judicial action. The costly paper quality probably exceeded most infractions themselves. This is where 2 decades on the bench proved valuable. During legal education, I had committed Colorado's association regulations to memory after my property owner attempted comparable intimidation methods. These letters possessed more judicial deficiencies than a criminal attorney's defense. Authentic association penalties must be proportionate, connected to legitimate infractions, and correctly recorded in ratified regulations. Bryn's notifications referenced imaginary rules and neglected to supply required hearing procedures. Time for judicial retaliation. I dedicated 3 nights in Harold's lower-level workspace, encircled by his legal volumes and the aged scent of old judicial texts, constructing my opposition. I submitted a formal grievance with the Colorado Real Estate Commission specifying Bryn's procedural infractions. I photographed my property comprehensively, generated spreadsheets recording her unlawful penalty patterns. My evidence conservation training was about to become militarized. However, Bryn hadn't completed her incompetent efforts. On Thursday morning, while I was in the city sentencing intoxicated drivers, my recently installed surveillance cameras documented pure criminal idiocy in progress. Bryn arrived with companions. Her interior designer, an emaciated woman dressed completely in white, and her fitness instructor, seemingly working additionally as a property evaluator. They dedicated 2 hours fabricating proof for imaginary infractions. The designer gestured theatrically at Harold's award-winning roses as though 15 years of meticulous cultivation had personally offended her design preferences. The trainer, obviously more accustomed to nutritional supplements than property regulations, recorded observations on professional-appearing clipboards that I viewed the recording that night with increasing fury. These individuals were generating false documentation to justify false penalties. In my courtroom, we designated this conspiracy to perpetrate fraud. Then Walt Henderson arrived at my entrance, pipe smoke mixing with cool evening atmosphere as he communicated in concerned murmurs. "Judge, this Bryn woman has been methodically targeting individuals. Recall the Rodriguez family? She compelled them to eliminate their Virgin of Guadalupe garden sculpture. Labeled it non-compliant religious representation. $800 in penalties before they ultimately sold and relocated. My judicial awareness activated. What additional information? A single mother nearby received penalties for her children's sidewalk chalk artwork on their personal driveway. She claimed it was damaging shared space appearance. We're discussing rainbows and game squares, Judge. The pattern became transparent like proof arranging itself during final statements. Bryn wasn't exclusively targeting me. She was executing a methodical harassment operation against anyone who didn't conform to her suburban ideal vision. Hispanic families, single mothers, elderly residents with limited finances, and now a widowed judge who had previously ruled against her husband's contractor frauds. This was discrimination concealed in association administration, supported by false documentation and unlawful penalty frameworks. I had discovered myself amid a significantly larger criminal operation that made my fence conflict appear like a minor offense. The sound of my writing instrument documenting these discoveries filled Harold's silent workspace. He had consistently stated effective legal approach resembled surgery. Exact, systematic, and devastatingly successful when performed correctly. I was about to conduct major surgery on Bryn Ashworth Sterling's minor domain of petty oppression. She had committed the typical error of targeting someone who comprehended precisely how to disassemble her operation systematically using the identical judicial system she had been corrupting for her personal retaliations. Harold used to jest that judges were merely arbiters with legal credentials and constant dispositions. Time to demonstrate to this association tyrant what occurs when you initiate conflict with someone who composes the rules of confrontation professionally. Bryn's subsequent action crossed the boundary from harassment into serious crime category. The woman had evidently concluded that if manufactured infractions weren't succeeding, genuine trespassing might communicate a more powerful message. She attacked while I was in the city sentencing a domestic abuser to 18 months. My surveillance cameras documented every criminal moment of her emergency property examination, a legal power that existed exclusively in her delusional thinking. There she was, confident as could be in expensive athletic attire, walking through my rear yard as though she had acquired the property title. Pink measuring device in hand, photographing everything from perspectives that would embarrass celebrity photographers. The boldness peaked when she compressed her face against my kitchen glass, shielding her vision to observe inside at Harold's coffee container, still positioned on the surface, the one I couldn't manage to clean. However, Bryn's criminal foolishness achieved unprecedented levels when she intentionally left my rear entrance gate completely open. Not accidentally, intentionally. The surveillance recording displayed her forcing it open, verifying the fastener wouldn't secure, then departing with a pleased expression. When I returned home that night, exhausted from listening to domestic violence accounts, I discovered my refuge violated and my greatest fear actualized. Gavel was absent. This 14-year-old tabby wasn't merely a companion animal. He was Harold's concluding present to me, rescued from the courthouse parking area during a severe storm 3 years prior. The feline who had rested on Harold's lap during chemotherapy sessions, purring solace into his suffering. My final living link to 28 years of matrimony. The panic struck like a tangible impact. I dedicated 3 days searching, my voice hoarse from calling his name through every passage and drainage system in a 6-block area. Walt Henderson coordinated neighborhood search groups. Even the Rodriguez family, who had relocated due to Bryn's harassment, operated back to assist in searching. Then arrived the telephone call that made my blood turn cold. Judge Blackwood, this is Dr. Martinez at Mountain View Animal Emergency. Someone transported in a feline matching your description. He's in severely poor condition. I discovered Gavel barely responsive in an oxygen chamber, his ribs fractured, extremely dehydrated, and traumatized beyond recognition. $800 in emergency surgery later, the veterinarian delivered information that made my hands tremble with fury. These wounds are compatible with being pursued by equipment. High-intensity leaf blowers, perhaps lawn machinery. The stress alone nearly killed him. The surveillance recording revealed the reality. 1 hour following Bryn's unlawful trespassing, her landscaping team had arrived with industrial leaf blowers, terrorizing my traumatized feline through the open entrance she had left as an exit path. They had pursued him 2 blocks before he had fallen into a drainage system, injured and dying. This wasn't harassment any longer. This was attempted killing of my family member. However, This is where Bryn committed her catastrophic error. She had just perpetrated multiple serious crimes against a sitting judge who comprehended precisely how to militarize the judicial system for maximum destruction that I replaced every lock, installed no trespassing notices, and submitted criminal accusations for unauthorized entry and animal mistreatment. Then I contacted Channel 7's Sarah Morgan, an aggressive journalist who concentrated on revealing suburban corruption. Judge versus Association, When Watchdogs Attack, transmitted 3 nights subsequently. Sarah's inquiry revealed Bryn's methodical targeting of minority and elderly residents, complete with surveillance recording of her criminal trespassing and the landscaping team's attack on Gavel. The community reaction was explosive. Donation proposals flooded in not merely for veterinary expenses, but for legal costs to obliterate that mentally unstable association. Justice for Gavel detonated across social platforms. 3 legal practices proposed complementary services. The Colorado Attorney General's department contacted to address civil rights infractions. Most magnificently, 5 additional families emerged with comparable horror accounts. Elderly Mrs. Morgan compelled to eliminate her deceased husband's memorial garden. The Johnson family penalized into financial ruin for their disabled child's wheelchair access. A pattern of targeting anyone who didn't conform to Bryn's vision of suburban excellence. However, the genuine transformation arrived during my investigation into Colorado's property defense regulations. Hidden in the statutes, I had discovered a magnificent piece of legal weaponry. Unauthorized entry with intent to frighten carried identical penalties as burglary. Additionally, animal mistreatment accusations could be combined with conspiracy if multiple individuals were implicated. Bryn's landscaping team hadn't merely committed one offense. They had generated a federal organized crime foundation. That night, Gavel ultimately purred against my chest for the initial time since the assault. The sound mixed with the silent hum of my recently installed security system and the distant clicking of my keyboard as I composed criminal grievances that would terminate Bryn's dominance of terror permanently. Harold used to state that judges were merely arbiters with permanent power and extensive recollections. Time to demonstrate to this suburban terrorist what transpires when you torture a federal judge's family. She had intensified from civil infractions to serious assault. My reaction would be biblical. Bryn's desperation achieved nuclear levels when she recognized her criminal trespassing had reversed into federal accusations. Therefore, naturally, she chose to obliterate my profession before I could obliterate hers. The grievance arrived at my workspace via registered mail on Tuesday morning. Official Colorado Judicial Discipline Commission letterhead that made my coffee taste like residue. Bryn's accusations read like imagination. Judge Blackwood misuses judicial power to frighten law-respecting homeowners, militarizing the judicial system for personal retaliations that endanger community protection. The supporting proof was criminal in its inventiveness. Altered photographs displaying my memorial garden as some form of neighborhood deterioration, fabricated witness declarations from her designer and trainer asserting I had threatened them, and timestamps that would make a forensic technician weep with amusement. However, Bryn's nuclear alternative, she had disclosed everything to political websites that opposed my previous environmental judgments. Within hours, I was trending as liberal judge terrorizes patriotic association. Comment areas detonated with online activists demanding my impeachment, disbarment, and inventive recommendations about what should occur to activist judges who despise America. For 72 hours, I observed 20 years of judicial service get shredded by individuals who couldn't spell jurisprudence but somehow comprehended constitutional law superior to federal judges. Then my deliverance arrived in the form of a silver-haired woman carrying homemade baked goods. Patricia, Pat, Donnelly appeared like everyone's retired librarian. Practical cardigan, orthopedic footwear, hands that trembled somewhat with age. What she didn't appear like was a 25-year FBI veteran who had concentrated in financial offenses and had evidently been executing surveillance on Bryn for weeks. "Judge, I believe you should examine this," she stated, settling into Harold's chair with the peaceful confidence of someone accustomed to delivering life-altering information. Pat distributed photographs across my kitchen surface like playing cards in a high-stakes competition. Meet Bethany Sterling of Phoenix, Arizona. 3 insurance accusations in 2 years, mysterious flooding, convenient electrical fire, and miraculous vandalism. 400,000 in payments disappeared immediately before the grand jury assembled. Why judicial training activated, recognizing patterns like genetic proof. She's accomplished this previously. Standard operation. Target established neighborhoods, generate conflicts to justify accusations, disappear before inquiries conclude. Pat's FBI awareness remained surgically sharp despite retirement. However, here's the magnificent part. She submitted her current homeowner's application under false identity. That's federal mail fraud. The documents Pat generated made my prosecutor's heart rejoice. Bryn's current policy valued her $800,000 house at $2.8 million. Her application contained falsehoods about previous accusations, identity modifications, and financial background that would make federal prosecutors weep with delight. She's not harassing you because of old resentments, Pat continued, organizing proof with professional exactness. You're the diversion. Maintain everyone concentrated on association conflict while she embezzles association funds and establishes the subsequent accidental fire. The revelation struck like a judicial gavel to the skull. This wasn't personal revenge. It was criminal misdirection. While I had been battling fence infractions, Bryn had been draining association emergency funds and preparing insurance fraud that would devastate the entire community. Pat handed me a manila case thick enough to suffocate a defense attorney. Sterling Premium Builders submitted bankruptcy last month. Colorado suspended their permit for tax evasion. The association presidency was never about neighborhood control. It was about accessing community funds for personal utilization. Harassment wasn't random targeting. It was professional diversion, maintaining a federal judge occupied with petty conflicts while she methodically robbed our community comprehensively. However, Pat's concluding revelation made my blood freeze. She's already submitted preliminary insurance accusations for developing structural problems and increasing neighborhood safety concerns. Your house isn't merely a target, Judge. It's scheduled to be proof in her subsequent insurance fraud. That night, I sat encircled by proof that transformed my personal disaster into a federal organized crime prosecution. Bank documents displaying $340,000 absent from association emergency funds. Insurance applications containing sufficient falsehoods to trigger perjury accusations. A pattern of targeting minorities and elderly residents that communicated civil rights infractions. Bryn hadn't selected me because I had ruled against her husband. She had chosen me because terrorizing a federal judge generated perfect concealment for methodical theft and fraud preparation. However, in her criminal arrogance, she had committed one catastrophic miscalculation. Rather than targeting defenseless elderly residents, she chose to execute federal offenses against someone who comprehended precisely how to disassemble criminal operations using every instrument in the federal legal arsenal. The gentle illumination of my computer display lit Harold's workspace as I initiated composing communications to federal prosecutors who concentrated in interstate fraud and civil rights infractions. My husband consistently stated that patience wasn't merely a virtue. It was a weapon when utilized by someone who comprehended timing. Bryn Ashworth Sterling was about to discover that executing insurance frauds while terrorizing a federal judge wasn't merely foolish. It was life sentence foolish. Time to demonstrate to this suburban criminal what federal justice resembled when it was personal. The manila package Pat slid across my kitchen surface felt heavier than a death judgment. Inside were photographs that made my hands tremble and my prosecutor's awareness scream in recognition. Judge, what I'm about to display to you transforms everything, Pat stated, her voice carrying the significance of 25 years pursuing federal criminals. Bryn Ashworth Sterling doesn't exist. The initial photograph displayed a California driver's permit from 2018. Rebecca Ashworth with Bryn's face smiling back at me. The second revealed Beth Sterling from Phoenix. Identical woman, different identity. The third made my coffee container slip from numb digits. Sandra McKenzie from Detroit, dated 2010, with a federal prisoner identification number stamped across the bottom. She's a professional community destroyer, Pat explained, organizing proof with surgical exactness. 4 states, 6 identities, methodical association infiltration, followed by embezzlement and insurance fraud. She's stolen over $4 million in the past decade. My judicial training activated, but the personal horror made my voice crack. How many families has she obliterated? 15 confirmed. Always the identical pattern. Target established neighborhoods. Generate harassment operations against minorities and elderly residents. Embezzle emergency funds. Then ignite high-value properties for insurance payments. Pat's FBI awareness remained razor-sharp despite retirement. In Sacramento, 3 Hispanic families were expelled before the community center mysteriously burned. Phoenix lost 5 elderly residents to stress-related health complications during her dominance of terror. The subsequent document made my blood freeze solid. Architectural designs for my house acquired through Sterling Premium Builder Contractor Database, marked with detailed observations about electrical vulnerabilities, foundation access locations, and optimal fire acceleration patterns. She's been planning to incinerate your house since day one, Pat stated quietly. The harassment was misdirection while she prepared the perfect arson. Your property is valued at $180,000, but Harold's life insurance upgrades pushed the rebuild value to $320,000. She's planning to assert fire spread to her property, triggering both policies for maximum payment. My hands trembled as I traced Harold's electrical upgrade observations in the margins. Work we had accomplished together during his concluding months, attempting to generate lasting improvements to our refuge. Bryn had transformed our affection into her criminal opportunity. However, Pat's concluding revelation shattered every assumption I had made about this prosecution. She's not merely a criminal, Judge. She's a federal fugitive operating under stolen identities while technically still in witness protection. Bryn McKenzie testified against a Detroit fraud organization in 2012, received 18 months federal time, then disappeared from the program in 2015. The implication struck like a judicial gavel to the skull. This woman was executing organized crime operations while protected by federal witness programs, stealing taxpayer-funded identities to perpetrate the precise offenses she had supposedly reformed from. The witness protection violation alone carries 10 years federal minimum, Pat continued. Add the multi-state fraud conspiracy, identity theft, and now attempted arson against a federal judge. She's facing life without parole. That I stared at photographs of families she had obliterated, communities she had devastated, elderly residents who had perished from stress-induced heart attacks during her harassment operations. My personal disaster was merely the latest chapter in a decade-long federal offense spree. The aged scent of old case files mixed with the bitter taste of betrayal as I recognized the scope of Bryn's criminal operation. She hadn't targeted me because of old resentments. She had researched my husband's death, my financial vulnerability, my judicial schedule, and my emotional attachments to generate the perfect victim profile. However, in her criminal arrogance, she had committed one catastrophic miscalculation. She had chosen to execute federal offenses against someone who comprehended precisely how to coordinate multi-jurisdictional prosecutions with every federal agency from FBI to Treasury. Time to demonstrate to this professional predator what federal justice resembled when it was personal, permanent, and absolutely merciless. My kitchen transformed into a federal war room faster than you could articulate organized crime conspiracy. By Thursday night, Pat, Walt, and attorney Rebecca Morgan sat around Harold's surface like avenging angels planning biblical justice. Encircled by proof boxes that could bury Bryn's criminal operations 6 feet underground, Rebecca Morgan was a legal predator in expensive suits. Former federal prosecutor, transformed white-collar defense attorney who had never lost in organized crime prosecution and had evidently been anticipating her entire profession for a villain this perfectly prosecutable. She had operated down from Denver with 3 paralegals and sufficient legal firepower to flatten a small dictatorship. Judge, we're not merely prosecuting neighborhood harassment, Rebecca announced, distributing color-coded flowcharts across my surface like battle plans for a world war. We're dismantling a decade-long federal offense spree that's obliterated 15 communities and stolen over $4 million. The scent of fresh legal documents mixed with Walt's pipe smoke as we outlined our 3-pronged assault: federal annihilation, state prosecution, and civil rights demolition. Rebecca's approach was surgical in its exactness and biblical in its scope. Federal accusations first. Mail fraud across state boundaries carries 20-year minimums. Wire fraud for electronic association theft adds another 20. Identity theft using witness protection programs, 10 years mandatory. organized crime conspiracy for methodical community destruction, life without parole. She smiled like a shark detecting blood. We're discussing federal judgments that'll maintain her locked up until climate change submerges the prison. Pat coordinated federal agency involvement with retired FBI efficiency that made current agents appear like shopping mall security. Colorado Bureau of Investigation, Treasury Financial Crimes, FBI Interstate Fraud Task Force. They're all enthusiastic over this prosecution. By tomorrow morning, Bryn will possess more federal surveillance than a terrorist cell. My role was proof preservation and victim coordination, skills I had perfected during 20 years of complex criminal prosecutions. During legal education, I had committed every provision of Colorado's Open Records Act to memory after my property owner attempted concealing financial documents. Association finances were completely transparent to community members who knew how to request them correctly. We were about to demand 5 years of detailed accounting and observe Bryn's embezzlement operation crumble under public examination. That Walt's community intelligence network was our secret weapon. 60 years of neighborhood relationships had generated an information web that would make intelligence agencies jealous. Every family Bryn terrorized is documenting everything, he reported, organizing victim declarations with military exactness. Mrs. Rodriguez is operating back from Phoenix with 17 witnesses. The Johnson family is maintaining disability discrimination documents that'll make federal prosecutors weep with delight. However, our most satisfying preparation was the technical surveillance upgrade. Pat had transformed my modest security system into federal proof collection equipment capable of recording offenses in courtroom quality detail. Every camera perspective was calibrated for maximum prosecutorial impact. Here's the magnificent part. Pat explained while testing audio equipment that could capture conversations 3 houses away. Bryn's actively perpetrating fresh offenses while we're constructing the prosecution. Every fraudulent penalty, every harassment correspondence, every association fund transfer generates real-time proof for federal prosecutors. Rebecca handled immediate legal protection with the ruthless efficiency of someone who had concentrated in obliterating white-collar criminals. Emergency injunctions freeze association accounts tomorrow morning. Criminal grievances arrive at 3 jurisdictions simultaneously. Civil rights infractions submitted with Colorado Attorney General for methodical targeting based on ethnicity and age. The financial implications were equally devastating for Bryn's operation. I had discovered during my judicial profession that the Homeowners Protection Act required insurance companies to notify mortgage holders about fraud inquiries. Bryn's insurance frauds would trigger audits of every Pinewood policy, potentially saving neighbors hundreds of thousands in premium increases while obliterating her credibility with every insurance company in America. Our emergency protocols acknowledged that cornered criminals became desperately dangerous. Rebecca had arranged protective surveillance for vulnerable residents, including elderly neighbors and families with small children. We had discovered from federal prosecutions that methodical fraudsters often intensified to violence when facing life judgments by midnight. We had constructed a legal apparatus designed for complete annihilation of Bryn's criminal operation with maximum protection for every victim she had terrorized. The exactness was magnificent, the scope was overwhelming, and the outcome was inevitable. When we're completed, Rebecca summarized with prosecutorial satisfaction, Bryn McKenzie will dedicate her remaining years in federal maximum security. Sterling Premium Builders gets liquidated for victim restitution. Every harassed resident receives compensation plus punitive damages. And we establish legal precedents protecting communities nationwide from comparable predators. The silent hum of my upgraded security system mixed with the gentle clicking of my keyboard as I composed victim impact declarations designed to make federal judges demand maximum judgments. Harold consistently stated that patience wasn't merely a virtue. It was a weapon when combined with overwhelming legal force applied at precisely the correct psychological moment. Tomorrow morning, professional criminal Bryn Ashworth Sterling would discover that terrorizing a federal judge's community wasn't merely catastrophically foolish. It was life judgment guaranteeing, legacy obliterating, federal prison ensuring foolish. Time to execute justice with extreme legal prejudice. Bryn's reaction to our legal offensive proved she had graduated from petty harassment to full-blown domestic terrorism. Her desperation was about to transform my neighborhood into a crime scene that would make federal prosecutors enthusiastic. The assault arrived Tuesday afternoon while I was in the city sentencing a domestic abuser. Perfect alibi timing that Bryn had clearly researched through my public court schedule. My military-grade security system documented every criminal moment in proof-quality high-definition AT247 p.m. Unmarked trucks discharged a team that moved with professional efficiency. These weren't landscapers. They were arson specialists wearing coveralls and carrying equipment designed for one purpose: transforming my house into an insurance fire that would spread to Bryn's property for maximum payment. The cameras recorded them generating accelerant pathways around my foundation, installing unmarked propane connections near electrical panels, and positioning dead vegetation in patterns that would guarantee fire spread toward Bryn's million-dollar target. The exactness was chilling, the criminal intent obvious, and the federal proof quality absolutely devastating. However, Bryn's nuclear-level foolishness peaked when she arrived with Channel 7's news team, asserting she had received anonymous information about dangerous fire hazards at the judge's residence. "Community protection is my exclusive concern," she told Sarah Morgan while standing directly over planted proof of her own arson conspiracy. When public officials ignore fire prevention, innocent neighbors could perish. The audacity was impressive. The federal accusations would be biblical. My telephone erupted with calls from Pat's surveillance network. Walt had photographed the entire team from multiple perspectives. Mrs. Rodriguez had recorded license plates that would make police identifications unnecessary. Even our postal worker had documented suspicious activity while delivering what would become the final mail my house might ever receive. Then Fire Marshal Jake Morrison arrived for Bryn's requested safety examination. Morrison was a 30-year arson investigation veteran whose trained vision spotted planted proof faster than a federal prosecutor spots plea negotiations. "Judge," he stated quietly, kneeling beside obviously artificial accelerant patterns, "someone's establishing your house to burn. This isn't code infraction. This is premeditated murder." The soil analysis would subsequently reveal professionally applied fire accelerants. Gas connections violated 16 safety codes and bore fingerprints that matched Sterling Premium's contractor database. The placement patterns indicated expert knowledge of fire behavior, insurance investigation procedures, and precisely how to generate accidental blazes that would trigger maximum payments. Whoever planned this knows how to kill individuals and make it appear like electrical malfunction, Morrison continued, his professional disgust palpable. These aren't random safety problems. This is methodical preparation for insurance fraud through homicide. However, Bryn's desperation achieved criminal crescendo when Morrison refused to condemn my property based on planted proof. Her reaction was documented on his department-issued body camera, a cash bribery attempt that transformed misdemeanor harassment into federal corruption accusations carrying decade-long prison judgments. "Inspector, surely we can handle this situation efficiently," Bryn stated, sliding a thick package across his clipboard with practiced corruption. "Community protection requires proper documentation, and I'm certain you comprehend the importance of cooperation." That Morrison's body camera recorded every incriminating word, every unlawful gesture, and Bryn's shocked expression when he informed her that bribing public officials was federal crime punishable by 10 years minimum security. The community reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Pat's intelligence network revealed comparable arson preparation at 3 other targeted properties, all owned by elderly residents or minority families. Federal agents swarmed Pinewood like antibodies attacking infection, documenting methodical terrorism that made Bryn's operation resemble organized offense. Rebecca Morgan's legal reaction was swift and merciless. Federal warrants issued within hours for Bryn, her husband, and their entire criminal team. Bank accounts frozen pending organized crime inquiry. Sterling Premium placed under federal asset forfeiture that would liquidate everything they had stolen. However, the most magnificent irony, Bryn's planted proof became forensic proof of premeditated arson conspiracy. Her bribery attempt generated federal corruption accusations that would stack with existing offenses like legal dominoes falling toward life judgments. That night, I sat encircled by proof that would guarantee federal prison for everyone implicated in Bryn's criminal operation. The acrid scent of planted accelerant still hung in the atmosphere, but it no longer smelled like destruction. It smelled like justice being prepared with federal exactness. My hands trembled as I recognized how close I had come to perishing in Harold's house. Encircled by recollections of our existence together, while Bryn collected insurance money on my corpse. The woman hadn't merely planned theft. She had planned murder disguised as accident. However, her criminal overconfidence had obliterated her own operation. Every planted accelerant became federal proof. Every bribery attempt generated additional serious accusations. Every witness she had attempted to silence was now cooperating with federal prosecutors who concentrated in maximum judgments. The gentle hum of federal surveillance equipment mixed with distant sounds of law enforcement agencies coordinating dawn raids that would terminate Bryn's dominance of terror permanently. Harold consistently stated that justice delayed wasn't justice denied. Sometimes it was justice being sharpened to lethal exactness. Tomorrow morning, domestic terrorist Bryn Ashworth Sterling would discover that attempting to murder a federal judge carried consequences she had never imagined. The explosion at 3:17 a.m. ripped me from dreams of Harold into a disaster that would haunt Bryn Ashworth Sterling for the remainder of her federal prison judgment. I was sleeping in Walt's guest room, my own house no longer safe after yesterday's arson preparation, when the blast shook windows 3 blocks away. Through Walt's bedroom glass, I observed 28 years of recollections erupt into flames that transformed night into hellish orange daylight. Harold's house, our refuge, the kitchen where we had planned our retirement, the bedroom where I had held him during his concluding nights, the memorial garden where his ashes were scattered among roses he had tended for 15 years, all of it disappearing into smoke and federal proof. The fire was so intense that Denver Fire had to establish a 3-block perimeter. Professional arsonists had transformed my home into a controlled demolition disguised as electrical malfunction, using techniques that guaranteed maximum destruction and optimal insurance timing. However, Bryn's criminal overconfidence had just generated the most magnificent trap in federal prosecution history. I stood on Walt's porch in Harold's old bathrobe, observing our existence burn while federal arson investigator Marcus Webb coordinated a crime scene that resembled domestic terrorism. "Judge, this wasn't random," he stated grimly. Thermal imaging revealing accelerant patterns that formed perfect fire pathways. Someone wanted you deceased and wanted it to appear accidental. The proof was overwhelming and perfectly preserved. My security system had survived in fireproof housing, documenting every criminal moment. Sterling Premium's team entering at 2:45 a.m., followed by B.